Coming up today, Korea's rival parties resume discussions as they attempt to reach a compromise on how to redraw constituencies for next April's general elections. Korea and Japan are holding their 10th round of working-level talks on the issue of Japan's sexual enslavement of Korean women before and during World War II. Plus, Korea added almost 350,000 new jobs in October, a 5-month high. The nation's jobless rate edges down to 3.1%. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Wednesday, the 11th of November. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. And we start at the National Assembly, where the rival parties are just beginning another round of negotiations over how to redraw the nation's electoral map ahead of general elections set for next spring. 4 representatives from the ruling Seoul Party and 4 from the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy are attending the talks. The deadline for submitting a plan to Parliament is this Friday, 5 months ahead of the elections. The polls will be held in April next year. The two parties attempted to reach a compromise last night but failed. The ruling party wants to maintain the 300-seat parliament by increasing the number of constituencies while reducing proportional representation members who are chosen based on the total number of votes each party gets. The MPAD is opposed to that plan, saying it will stoke regionalism in Korean politics. It wants to maintain the number of seats given to proportional representation members. The Constitutional Court ruled late last year that the constituencies should be redrawn to realise a more equal and fair representation of the population in each district. Now, Korea and Japan are holding their 10th round of talks in Seoul today on resolving their differences over Tokyo's wartime sexual enslavement of Korean women. This follows an agreement reached by the leaders of both countries to resolve the issue as quickly as possible. Our Song Ji-sun is standing by for us at the Foreign Ministry. Ji-sun.
Good afternoon, Mark. South Korea's Northeast Asian Affairs Bureau Chief at the Foreign Ministry, Lee Sang-duk, has been sitting down with his Japanese counterpart, Ishigane Kimihiro, for the 10th round of working-level talks. It's worth noting that these are the first talks since the summit earlier this month between President Park Geun-hye and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. The two leaders had agreed to expedite their negotiations for a faster resolution. It also comes just a few days before the two leaders could meet again at multilateral talks like the G20 summit that will be held later this weekend in Turkey. Although the leaders have nothing official scheduled, they could hold a conversation on the sidelines to follow up on this issue. However, no details have been released about what was discussed today at this 10th round of talks. The Japanese representative went past by reporters without saying too much about his arrival here this morning. But the two are expected to continue their talks during a lunch session later this afternoon. Mark?
Now, Ji-sun, as we've mentioned a few times now, this is the 10th round of these talks. The first were held in April last year. The two sides are talking, but can we really expect any concrete results today?
Not likely, Mark, and not likely before the end of this year. The key for the two officials will be to narrow their differences enough so they can reach an agreement on the matter by the end of the year, as proposed by President Park Geun-hye prior to summit talks. However, Abe is firm that Japan's legal obligations was settled in a 1965 agreement that normalized relations between the two countries, adding that the two should work together so this issue doesn't come up again for future generations. Now, speaking on a local radio program this morning, Korea's Vice Foreign Minister Im Sung-nam countered that argument, stating that the so-called comfort woman issue was not included in that treaty. Now, Tokyo is likely to offer the victims financial aid instead of the formal apology and compensation that Seoul and the victims demand. But the clock is ticking for the handful of the remaining survivors. Over 200,000 women, most of whom were Korean, were forced into sexual slavery by the Japanese military during and before World War II, but only 47 are still alive today. I'm Song Ji-sung reporting live at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Back to you, Mark.
Now, in some economic news, on the back of growing domestic demand, data is showing signs of improving employment trends here in Korea, with the number of new jobs added last month hitting a 5-month high. Our Hwang Jie has the details.
Korea created 348,000 new jobs in October from a year earlier, with the total number of employed standing at over 26 million. That's the biggest number of jobs added since May this year. Statistics Korea data also shows that the jobless rate for those aged 15 to 29 dropped to 7.4% last month, the lowest level in almost 2.5 years. From a year earlier, the figure was down 0.6 percentage points. The overall unemployment rate also dropped from the previous year to 3.1%. The agency says new jobs in the manufacturing sector boosted job growth after Korea's industrial output rose 2.4% in September, the biggest jump in 4.5 years. The agency expects the overall improvement in the jobs data to continue for a time being, saying domestic demand will further gain momentum. It added, though, that the government should boost efforts on its structural reform drive and raise the competitive edge in export-related industries. Hwang Jie, Arirang News.
Korea's Trade Ministry and 10 other government bodies have been holding a joint briefing to discuss ways to get slowing exports back on track. Officials from 11 government bodies, which included the Finance Ministry and the Korea Customs Service, agreed to support sectors with the greatest export potential, including OLED products, cosmetics and new drugs. They also agreed to create a 5-year plan to produce high-quality global consumer goods. Following the briefing, Trade Minister Yoon Sang-jik emphasized the importance of quickly ratifying the bilateral free trade agreements with China, Vietnam and New Zealand. Pressure is growing on Korea to boost exports as outbound shipments have been on a falling streak for the past 10 months. Seoul City will open 300 more public daycare centres next year in an effort to expand childcare access. According to the Seoul Metropolitan Government, on this Wednesday, it has budgeted nearly $143 million to build the centres. Starting this year through 2018, the city plans to add 1,000 daycare centres and increase the proportion of public daycare centres from the current 14% to 30%. In the past 3 years, nearly 300 centres have been opened, raising the number of public daycare centres to over 930 as of the end of last year. The city government also plans on placing childcare assistance in 5,000 daycare centres. Now, Korea's top mobile carriers are close to fully commercializing VO LTE, which is an advanced voice calling system, making them the first in the world to do so. According to telecommunication industry sources, SK Telecom, KT and LGU+ will hold a joint demonstration and declare full commercialization of the service next Friday, November 20th. It's been about 3 years since the three carriers launched the Voice over Long-Term Evolution, also known as HD Voice, which uses LTE networks to improve call quality and allow for faster connections. Until now, though, only smartphone users using the same carrier could take advantage of the service. This due to differences in opinion over inter-carrier connection service fees and payment systems. Industry experts expect the full commercialization of VO LTE to produce a wide range of convergent services, like those allowing users to make and receive calls through laptops and smart TVs. Ice cream, soda and cookies all have one thing in common: sugar, and lots of it. But have you ever thought about how much sugar is too much? Well, the US Food and Drug Administration has released some new limits on how much sugar we should eat, and it may be less than you thought. Son Jung-in reports.
The U.S. Food and Drug Administration has released a new set of guidelines that recommend a daily cap on the amount of sugar people should consume. According to the New York Times, the FDA has set new guidelines that recommend people limit their added sugar to no more than 10% of their daily calories. For anyone older than 3, that means eating fewer than 12.5 teaspoons or 50 grams of sugar a day. Children between the ages of 1 and 3 should not consume more than 25 grams. Some people may decide to cut back on their sugar intake by giving up soft drinks. A regular-sized can of Coke already has the maximum recommended amount of sugar. But health experts say that's not enough because sweeteners lurk in less obvious foods like low-fat yogurt, salad dressings, and even whole-grain bread. That's why the FDA is also pushing to require that all packaged food indicate the amount of added sugar on their nutrition label so consumers can distinguish between the amount of natural sugar and added sugar. Currently, nutrition labels in the U.S. reveal only the total amount of carbohydrates in a product. This is the strongest step the FDA has taken to curtail sugar consumption so far, but other health organizations had already taken the lead. In March, the World Health Organization dropped its sugar intake recommendations from 10% of daily calories to 5%. The American Heart Association also recommends stricter sugar limits, calling for women to limit themselves to 6 teaspoons of sugar a day and about 9 teaspoons for men. 손정인, Arirang News.
Now, a commemorative ceremony was held in the southern port city of Busan earlier today to honor soldiers who made the ultimate sacrifice during the Korean War. The Ministry of Patriots and Veterans Affairs invited some 90 veterans from UN member nations to the Turn Toward Busan ceremony. Veterans observed a minute's silence to honor the war dead at the UN cemetery at 11 a.m. That's around an hour ago now. 21 UN member nations also paid silent tribute to the fallen heroes at 11 a.m. local time by turning toward Busan wherever they are in the world. Now, this year is even more special as the ministry for the first time held a burial ceremony for a British Korean War veteran whose dying wish was to be laid to rest at the UN cemetery. Now, one of Europe's greatest post-war statesmen, Helmut Schmidt, has died at the age of 96. Schmidt, who was Chancellor of West Germany from 1974 to 1982, passed away at his home in Hamburg. German Chancellor Angela Merkel paid tribute to Schmidt, calling him a political institution and a source of advice and judgment that she valued. Schmidt, who championed closer European integration after seeing the horrors of World War II firsthand as a soldier, is widely admired by Germans and Europeans as a whole for his leadership, unwavering principles and plain-speaking style. Now, it's that time of the year again here in Korea. Nerves are frayed and the studying is even more intense as there's only one more day before hundreds of thousands of students take their university entrance exam, or Sunung, as it's called here. Over 630,000 people will be taking the test on Thursday at more than 1,200 test sites across the country. The exam will begin after 8 a.m. and finish at around 5 in the afternoon, so a long old day. To ease the traffic burden for test takers in the morning, many workers will be allowed to clock in an hour later than usual, and extra buses and subway trains will be laid on for the students. The country's stock market will also open at 10 a.m. instead of 9 a.m. Planes at Korea's airports will also be grounded for 35 minutes in the afternoon during the listening section of the English language test. Now, it's become a kind of custom in Korea to give Pepero, a chocolate-dipped cookie stick that looks like the number 1, as gifts on November 11th, a date made up, of course, of 4 ones, 11/11. It's an unofficial holiday, of course, but for many it's still a big deal. Lee Sueun has more.
Around this time of the year, it's common to find stacks and rows of Pepero boxes in and outside almost all convenience stores and supermarkets in Korea. These pretzel sticks dipped in chocolate, strawberry, and cookies and cream are long-nut favorites for Koreans of all ages. They're exchanged among friends and loved ones on Pepero Day, an unofficial national holiday celebrated on November 11th.
Pepero Day is a special day. It's also the 100th day since I started dating my girlfriend. So I decided to give her a Pepero as a present.
These nostalgic snacks are often quite cheap, less than $1, but gift sets can get extravagant, reaching up to $600 like this giant set shaped like a bicycle.
It is a burden to buy so many of them, but it's just a great day to show people that you love them, so I buy them every year.
E-Mart, the biggest supermarket chain in Korea, says Pepero sales always surge around the holiday.
During the 10 days leading up to Pepero Day, we sell about half a year's worth of sales.
Legend has it, Pepero Day started back in 1994 when middle school girls in the southern city of Busan gave each other Pepero on November 11th in hopes of becoming tall and skinny. Being that box of Pepero packs around 200 calories, getting thin off them might not be so easy. But it will definitely put a smile on your face, as well as the people you plan on giving them to. 이수은, Arirang News.
Well, that's all we have for now. I'm Mark Broome. Thank you as always for tuning in. We'll be back throughout the day with more newscasts. Goodbye.